Welcome to the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, the podcast that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dickson and I'm a professional sales and marketing recruiter. I love what I do, but my biggest frustration is seeing too many people not realizing their career potential. In this podcast, I'll introduce you to my network, an amazing group of business leaders in the biggest tier 1 organizations through to some super fast growth SMEs. They'll share their career journey and give unique advice and insights on managing your career and leading a function and a business. Join me, Mike Dickson of AXR Recruitment and Search, to help guide your future in sales and marketing. In this episode, I meet Chris Walker, Pacific Sales Director for Hasbro. We explore his move from UK retail giant Boots to a career in sales and discuss whether the retailer-supplier talent flow is still a trickle or has it turned into a torrent. Enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Sales and Marketing Director Incubator for 2023, the program that helps you make great career decisions to maximize your potential. My name is Mike Dickson, Director of the Sales, Marketing and Category Practice for AXR Recruitment and Search. And before I introduce today's guest, let me whet your appetite with what we have in store this year from the AXR network. Now, we're going to be hearing from some of Australia's fastest growing market makers and disruptors, people like Muti, Yes You Can Drinks, Obella, V2 Foods, right through some of the giants of the industry such as Nestle, Kellogg's and Blackmores. We're also going to be introducing you to some guests in some super topical areas like loyalty and revenue, as well as bringing the HR and category perspective. So lots to look forward to in 2023. But let's get into today. Welcome from the world of toys, play and entertainment, Chris Walker, Sales Director for Hasbro. Chris, how are you this morning?
Very well, thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Well, good to see you. And we had a very great good feedback from last year, Chris, and some of the intro questions we're running, and we're going to stick with that theme, and I'm going to ask you to kick things off today about your favorite brand, and you can't pick one that you're working on or have worked.
I was planning to choose some in the current portfolio, that's for sure. Tough on this. Many different brands, I think, for everybody over the lifetime, but for me, I'm probably going to go back to the world of sport, which is probably one of my real passions, and I'm going to pick Nike. Nike is probably one of my favorite brands, right up there. It's the ultimate disruptor. It's a business that's taken huge calculated risks as they were coming through to really change the nature of sport and the whole category, and really change that category from sport more to leisure, effectively, to make it accessible to everybody. There's how they did things as well. There's a fantastic book from the guy who started it, Phil Knight, called Shoe Dog, which is, I'd recommend anybody read if they haven't already, just on the trials and tribulations of how a small business starts and how they kind of formulate and make decisions and cash flow challenges and what have you. But small things like, orange shoebox, for example, to differentiate in the back office. So you can always pick the Nike brand out. So yeah, I'd probably go for the Nike one.
Now, I was on the way home last night, went past a Nike shop, and I saw a big 50 in the window. Is that 50 years old this year?
Must be around that. I think it's coming up to the 40th one of that Jordan thing. So there's a movie coming out, I think, in the next week or last week.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, so it's pretty close.
Yeah, right. This has been a brand been around for a while. Great. Yeah. Okay. Now, we were looking at some of the rooms we have here at AXR, Chris, and talking about the theme we have, which each room is themed as a job or a career you might have, aspired to as a kid. Now, when you were going back as a child, what career did you think you might have had?
Well, it probably wasn't this. If I go back 30 or so years ago. Look, I was very much aware of sales and marketing. My father had a small marketing business, so I was kind of aware of the kind of things he did. But when I was growing up, I actually wanted to be a pilot. The best route at the time was via the Royal Air Force, obviously from the other side of the world. So I went to officer selection training, got through 3 pretty tough days of that, and then failed the 4th and final interview. So I didn't know enough detail about all of the RAF bases, etc. So bit of a gut wrench at that one after 3-4 days there to actually fail that. So effectively, I was thinking, well, what next? I'd always wanted to travel. That was part of the reason I wanted to be a pilot, to travel. And so I went backpacking for a year. I lined up one or two other jobs before I left, and deferred a program with Boots before I left. So I went backpacking. That's when I kind of had my first experience of Australia, and sort of fell in love with Australia.
Fantastic. Funny enough, I almost became a pilot too, but I failed because I'm completely colourblind, which I kind of knew going in. I thought they might not pick that up.
Well, they find things like that out for you. They find out every single weakness that you might have.
Yeah, well, they really enjoyed my colourblindness. They actually sent me to very different medical centres to test just how bad it really was, and they said, yes, but as bad as we've seen. So, there's no way you're getting in a plane. Would you like to be ground crew? I said, no, I'm here to fly planes. So
Exactly.
No, thank you.
Very similar.
It's cool. You mentioned Boots, obviously, is your the program you deferred when you went backpacking, and you spent a long time at Boots, what, 10 years or so? Or, are you a retailer at heart?
I wouldn't say I'm a retailer at heart. Look, the reason I went into Boots, it was at the time, it still is. It's a great business.
Yeah.
It's a really great business. It was it's a great training ground. It's a UK icon. They had some fantastic brands in the business. They had their own label, which was one of the most trusted brands in the UK as well. It was really people focused, and it was just the training and support that came with it was just fantastic. So I thought, well, you can't really go wrong in terms of going back 25 years or so ago, how you build your careers. Very growth orientated as well. A lot of autonomy that they gave you early in your career, which is great. So things like, Chris, here's your budget for the next year. Got 4 weeks, come back in 4 weeks and tell me how you're going to hit your top and bottom line. Stuff like that. So that's actually quite unique, I think, when you're 3-4 years into your career to get that kind of stuff. Am I a retailer at heart? No, not particularly, but I do like retail. I had jobs in, like many others, I'm sure, when I was at college. I worked in the Bunnings equivalent over in the UK, so Sainsbury's home base, and some fantastic green dungarees when I was at college. So I kind of knew a lot about retail really. So it was kind of a natural fit to move into something like that, and then learning more from a head office perspective. Two things I really liked about it, two things I know about myself. I really like, the sport theme, working in teams and people. I just love working with people, first and foremost. And then secondly, I'm a bit of an analytical person as well. So, retail is detail, as they say, as I was even ground into me when I was in my college jobs. And so, you got into a lot of detail too. So it kind of played to those two elements as well.
Great. And we've had close to 60 guests on the podcast so far, Chris, and we explored a lot of, I guess, what we sort of call supplier side careers, a lot in the consumer and FMCG space. But I'd love us just to unpick, what does that first phase for you 10 years look like in terms of a career in retail? Take us through the early years. How did you move through the business?
So I guess the beauty of working on the retail side of things, when you can go through these kind of different programs, is that you essentially get exposure to every single function across the whole business. In that first 3 or 4 years, which gives you grounding in what that function does and the appreciation of that function. But then secondly, you kind of get a really good flavour for, what do you really like early in your career as well? What are the themes that you really like doing? So, for example, in those first 4 years, I pretty much did 7 or 8 different jobs, and it was across every single function. I did a supply chain role, did a finance role, did a marketing role, space management, sort of macro space management, how you allocate that, merchandising. And then got into sort of like the product management side of things, product stroke category management. At the time, it was product development, as well as the kind of more traditional buying function. And I kind of landed on that because, so 3-4 years in, I wanted something which kind of gave me very portable, transferable skills. Because I kind of loved Boots, but also I knew from my backpacking days that whilst Boots was an absolutely fantastic company, it was probably not a company I was necessarily going to stay with for life. Effectively. So that's kind of where I landed. And that's the bit I liked. It gave me lots of interaction with people internally as well as externally. Obviously meeting suppliers and what have you. So it was a really great ground. And obviously through that you move through different roles, and there's multiple different roles you can do. A little bit like probably like being in the Coles or Woolies here in terms of the size of office, 3,000-4,000 people and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, the huge organizations are, and it's that kind of size often gives you the opportunity to try things that in a small business you just can't do, or in a very different way. But, and if I think, and you and I are old enough, obviously, because we both lived through this, but in the kind of those mid-90s to mid kind of 2000s, a lot was changing really quickly in the marketplace. Data was becoming available for the first time and being manipulated and used. And my recollection is that Boots was probably at the cutting edge of that with the Advantage card, which was the first big loyalty program I remember being kind of, when Tesco had their club card and so forth as well. But did that kind of data loyalty piece start to change your world even back then?
Massively. So absolutely massively, yeah. So I can't remember whether or not it was Boots came out first or Tesco. They were in the 12 months of each other around about the late 90s. But yeah, it did. So at the time I was doing a role in the food area in Boots. So, Boots, and for those of you who aren't aware of Boots, Boots has a lunchtime offering, effectively a sandwich business. Does very, very well in some of the smaller city areas, London especially, very small stores. It's a footfall driver, essentially, was its purpose and role within the business to try and bring footfall in to then get the incremental purchase in the broader health and beauty space. The Boots sandwich offering, we tried multiple different promotions over a couple of years to try and get more people to buy them, buy X, get half price this, but a lot of them weren't sustainable. But then the Advantage card data came out. So then what we could do is we go, well, what does this tool give us? We didn't really know until we started sort of understanding it 12 months in, having lots of shopper data. And essentially what we could do is start going into this big database and then start mining it to actually understand how customers shop. Who buys a sandwich and a drink in combination, who just buys a sandwich, who buys a sandwich and a packet of crisps or chips here, who buys a sandwich and a chocolate bar. And you could start mapping that into the Venn diagrams and looking at a bullseye zone to say, right, okay, combinations of X, Y, Z. How do we then bundle something up into sort of a broader meal deal approach? What would the price be? How would we then go and, present that in store from a customer perspective to create an ease of shop? So there'd be lots of negotiations going on with some of the big manufacturers to make sure that they got a disproportionate share of shelves to make it easy to shop for some of those brands. And that was a phenomenal success. So we tested that in a couple of stores, got some feedback, saw actually what happened and could track and monitor that through the Advantage card database to see what the average rate of purchase was, and that was going up. Frequency of visit was going up too. So those are the kind of metrics that it really opened up. And for the first time, it really kind of was a material shift in the balance of power, because up until that time, suppliers pretty much had it all. And then you kind of move over to the retailer side, and now you've got the retailers having all this data, and actually it's a more granular level, which effectively means that the retailers have kind of got more knowledge and data than suppliers for the first time. So that was a really interesting piece too, because we could validate some of the supplier assumptions against some of our data. Yeah,
I remember living in the UK at the time, and Boots meal deals were revolutionary for your lunchtime, and they were you sucking in all the data. Whereas little did I know at the time, and manipulating my kind of shopping behaviour and all the rest of it. But fantastic. Could you stay at Boots forever? Is it that kind of business?
Yeah, easily stayed at Boots. There were so many different career pathways that you could go down. I actually moved out of the product management more into a marketing management role for another business development, really, moving into how Boots can expand into financial services. A few of the other retailers were doing it. So launching new products in the financial services area, leveraging the power of the brand, essentially. But I kind of had a number of bosses, fantastic bosses who were there, and kind of there were restructures galore within Boots. Every 12, 18 months was a restructure. I've always had this passion to travel and being inquisitive of what was happening outside of Boots. I'd also had multiple meetings with suppliers over a number of years. So when you're on the supplier side, you might have 1 or 2 meetings a month with your customer, but when you're on the retailer side, you can have a year's worth of meetings in a week. Effectively back-to-back meetings. So you kind of get really entrenched in, well, what are the kind of what does a good meeting look like? And I kind of looked at suppliers for a long time going, I can do that. I wonder what it's like. So I'd always been inquisitive on the supplier side, and there was not so I just thought at some point I'm going to have to jump out if I want to sort of scratch the itch.
How did you go about that? How did you kind of make the move?
Well, it's kind of a combination of a couple of things. When you've been somewhere for a long time and then there's restructures going on, there's a little bit of the selfish side of you that kind of goes, well, actually, I've been here a while. All these people are leaving. I'd actually quite like to leave with a package if I could. I was quite fortunate. There was a restructure going on. It was about the time it was probably around about the zone. I've been there just shy of 9 years. It was coming up to that point. Managed to exit with a package, went to the complete usual scenario that everybody does in their career. You go to what you know. Even though I've had this inquisitiveness on the supplier side, I just went, right, okay, there's a restructure coming up. I think it's going to happen this time. Well, I'm going to go apply for buying roles in other companies. So I left with a check in one hand and a job offer from Tesco and Asda in the other hand. Went on holiday to Italy. Had a week just chilling out on the beach in Italy. I actually thought, you know what, now I've just got to give this a roll. So I actually kind of declined those two offers and thought, right, now's the time to cross to the dark side, so to speak. So started the job search and use that opportunity to actually to cross over effectively.
Mm-hmm. And you worked at Brita initially before you spent the first of two pretty chunky periods at J&J. I know both businesses well from the Australian point of view, but talk about the transition from retailer to supplier. You must have had expectations about what it was like. What was it kind of like? Yeah, what you thought, or was it different?
Different,
yeah,
definitely different. I probably, like a lot of people on the buying side, kind of thought, well, these suppliers are just breeze in. They have a meeting with me a couple of times. Yeah, this must be straightforward. How hard can this be? Then they ring me up in the store on the way back and tell me one product's out of stock. That's not very helpful. No, it was very different. So, I mean, firstly, I've been in boots for a long time. So I kind of figured, I've been in a big company. I fancy doing something different. I'm going for a small company. That was probably a mistake, I would say. So the transition from a big company into a small company for me was not great. You know, they wanted to bring me in from a point of view of understanding the retail side. I went straight into, from being in boots to then managing the boots business. You think there'd be some advantages there because you way around, but actually the reality is that the boots buyers who I was dealing with, many of them thought of me as a threat and made it a bit of a challenge because I know all the intricacies of how they go about doing things and how they're going to fob me off and what have you. So I kind of knew what they were about, and it actually made it really challenging, to be honest. And the smaller business side of things as well, it meant, there wasn't the breadth of people in that business to actually have support to lean on effectively. So yeah, it was very different. From a what do you take into that role? You have an appreciation of what's important to the buyer. It's things like how do you make your business? How do you make a compelling business case? How do you make sure you keep open lines of communication? How do you make sure you get all your stuff back in a timely manner so you're not the one that they're chasing? You don't want to be that kind of supplier. Equally on the supplier side, you do have a little bit more time to look at some of the, to dive into that category because you need to be the expert. You've got to find the time to do it too. So there's much more onus on you to drive the agenda, essentially. But yeah, it was a tough start, and I think a couple of other things that probably surprised me, a lot more polarizing on the supplier side. Simple example for that would be a couple of years before we'd done these Boots own label internet auctions for toothbrushes, for example. So when I was doing those on the buying side, it would be a case of I've got 7 or 8 suppliers. I'm trying to drive down the cost price of these toothbrushes. The challenge to me is I knew I was going to have a toothbrush business. I just didn't know what I was going to save and what cost it was going to be. Flip that when you're into the supplier side, and suddenly it really is polarizing because you're either in or you're out. It's like putting everything on red 17 at the casino, basically. That's what it feels like. Yeah. So as a result of that, there's going to be a lot more internal stakeholder management to make sure that everybody's joined up with whatever the outcome is from the supplier side, to make sure that if you get it, everybody's high-fiving, but if you don't, because you wanted a number that they're getting it, you kind of, at least everybody's joined up in terms of why we didn't get it and where else we need to go beyond that. So yeah, there are probably some of the differences, similarities and differences.
Great. And were you surrounded by people who give you advice back then, Chris? Was there people giving you direction? Were you finding it all out yourself?
I think there was a little bit. So there were a couple of my suppliers that kind of got me inquisitive to start with a couple of suppliers who had made that transition, who were kind of talking about how good it was once they'd settled in, but they'd gone into bigger businesses. So I kind of got a couple of sound bites from them, but really it was really much a, feet in, straight in at the deep end, essentially, I would say. That was probably, it would have been better if, in hindsight, it would have been better if I'd have actually maybe sat down with those guys and said, what were the challenges that you had? How did you overcome those? Did you find what was the support network like in your business? What did you find the sort of things that worked for you?
Right. The move from retail to supply, I want to talk about that from two perspectives. First of all, back then, was that common what you did? You mentioned a couple others had done it. Was it a flow of people moving between the two, or was it more unusual?
Describe it as a flow, Mike.
Trickle?
It was more of a trickle. There were, obviously, the UK market's a little bit bigger than here. There were a few examples of it. There was one guy in Boots who was in Boots, went over to L'Oreal for a couple of years to get some supply experience, then came back into Boots.
Right.
There were a couple of other suppliers who'd been working for a couple of the grocers who went into one of the big retailers. Colgate were actually the big supplier, who took on a lot of ex-retailers. So they were probably the best exponents of it. But outside of that, no, most people were kind of linear, going through either the supplier or either a retailer, I would say. That would probably be. Yeah. So,
and when we kind of, we'll not jump forward, but I'm really keen to kind of talk about that in more detail. We'll come back to that point, Chris. But back to you and your career. So you moved to Australia, 2009, thereabouts. Was that kind of a personal thing? Was it professional? Combination of both?
It was very personal.
Oh, it's a story.
It's very personal. It was very personal. No, look, when I was backpacking for 10, 12 years before, as I said, I fell in love with Australia. I thought it was a great country. Kind of really felt comfortable here. Also happened to meet my wife here. She is not Australian. She is from England, which I remind her periodically that's actually why I spent 10 years back in England after I finished backpacking. But I wanted to come back. I'd always wanted to come back in a working capacity. So we actually applied for permanent residency visas probably about 3 or 4 years before. They have a 5-year validity, and then things get in the way. We had a couple of boys. I was finishing my MBA, and there was always something. We kind of got to the point where the visa was due to run out within 6 months. And then I kind of thought, well, if we don't do it now, when the kids are young and they're kind of still portable, relatively speaking, it's just never going to happen. And I'm kind of one of those people that kind of doesn't really want to get to 80 and go, well, what if I'd done that? Don't be a butt person. So, give it a go. And if it works, then great. So obviously, first port of call, I was working for J&J at the time because, I was with J&J. I was coming through a Pfizer acquisition, big global company, big reach as well. Well, how can I get a transfer? So I kind of planted the seed with J&J probably around about the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. This is what I want to do next, because they were trying to, they were offering me different roles, but they were all kind of London based. I didn't want to move down to London because they were very, very remote. Came over in the middle of 2008, met the J&J crew. Great. Yeah, we've got a job for you. We'll get something sorted for the beginning of 2009. Hedged my bets, met a couple of retail recruiters whilst I was here. Also kind of got some interest from another big company as well. So I thought, great, we're in here. Then got home thinking, right, at the end of the year, in 2008, beginning of 2009, we'll move over. GFC then happened, that little thing called the GFC.
Oh, yeah.
And then, no intercompany transfers, Chris. So that was around about September 2008. So we just took the decision to go, if we don't do it now, the visa won't land. We can't wait for a company. We'll just do it on our own. So actually, I quit my job and we just relocated ourselves at the beginning of 2009. And just sort of thought, well, let's give it a go. We rented the house out, landed here with a month's accommodation and no job. At the middle of the GFC, in hindsight, not the smartest move, but actually it was just a very personal thing. From a professional side of things, I think I got a little lucky, if I'm honest with you, in the sense that, that 2008, 2009 was when Coles were going through that big change and the retail scene was clearly changing. If you go back that 15 years, basically there was an influx of homes coming in to run grocery, essentially. and then bring a lot of those skills from the UK perspective in from a retailer side, and then that was then trickling through to the supplier side as well. So I think the fact that I've been running the Tesco business for J&J, landing here with no job, I mean, that was why I had, didn't find it too hard to find a role when I first got here, to be honest. So it's a little bit of the stars aligned in many respects. I think the lesson in that is sometimes, you've got to if you take a bit of a punt and back yourself, sometimes, you don't know what can happen.
It's quite ballsy though as well. And I think there's a component of that when you look at how many, Brits or others who come from overseas to Australia, and they do pretty well, and there's often this assumption, the Brits bring in different skill set. But then I've worked for a long time in the UK with many Aussies and Kiwis who do brilliantly over there. And I wonder if it's just a mindset of, I'm going to put myself another end of the world, I'm going to give it a fair crack.
Yeah. I think so. I don't think it's anything. There's nothing better about being a Brit coming to Australia. There's nothing better about an Aussie being in Britain. It's the same, essentially. Yeah. All the opportunities are there for both of us. Yes, there was a timing bit, but at the same time, I think the piece about people going from Australia to the UK or vice versa is when you make that move, you're all in. You want to make it work. So you also demonstrate the fact that you've got a degree of curiosity, and you want to grow as a person by an experience, and then I think that translates into a role as well. Yeah. And then you look at, you talk about how do you recruit and what sort of things do you recruit for. That curiosity, growth mindset type thing is a really important part of it. I'm sure we'll come back to it later, but certainly from my side it is. But I think then when we're in this country, well, I'm here, I'm on my own. We've got family.
Immediate family.
We've got to make this work. It's got to work, right? So you have a kind of a fierce drive to want to make it work. Yeah,
I think that's definitely it. Whether you're on your own or with family, you're kind of still on your own a little bit.
You're standing on your own 2 feet. Yeah. So yeah.
Now, I mentioned before you had 2 stints at J&J, so you did go back to J&J after Culver here.
Yes.
And that phrase boomerang employee, not many people go back. It's for you, was there something in particular that drew you back to J&J?
Yeah, there was actually. It was timing. Again, it was timing, I would say. So when I came over here, obviously J&J hadn't, unfortunately couldn't support me in that transition and relocation here. But when I got here, I connected with them and then they offered me a role. And I was like, well, I don't think so. It wasn't the right type of role at the time. So I thought I'd take my chances and mix my world up and go for something else. So I went to a business called Alberto Culver, had an absolutely brilliant time there, another smaller business, very kind of entrepreneurial mindset type place, and had a group of people there who were fantastic, still in contact with all of them. So really great small business. And we had a real change agenda at the time. So we kind of grew fairly significantly. I'd like to say that we did such a great job. We got bought by Unilever a little over Australia, but obviously it's a bigger play. We got bought by Unilever after a couple of years. So there were, I was looking at, what opportunities are to move into Unilever. There wasn't really anything there, but really through networks, I got a second bite at J&J. So J&J, I was introduced to J&J by my kind of regional guy who used to work there, who said we were looking for a couple of people. Went and had a cup of coffee, obviously on the back of that recommendation and working for them in the UK, I was lucky enough to get back into J&J. And the reason for going back is, I guess, boomeranging, yes, but A, different country, B, very different dynamics from a business perspective. The integration post Pfizer with J&J, which had happened in 2007, had been pretty seamless in the UK and had been a little bit more clunky here. And there was a new management team that had gone in with a real view to sort of driving the turnaround with that J&J business at the time, going back 10, 11 years ago. And as well as that, there was a huge amount of innovation coming as they were kind of really expanding the medicinal space by doing so, sort of like pharmacy to grocery switches of lots of medicinal. So huge innovation pipeline too, as well as the people that were there who were, there were a lot of things I was going to learn off those people as well.
Mm-hmm. And your first step as sales director, getting to the kind of the pointy end of your career, Chris, is with Coty. What was that step like? How did you make that happen?
So it was really through network. So the ideal pathway is obviously to try and go in, make that step up in a business that is the preferred route. Unfortunately, that transition was kind of stopped because there was some internal moves within J&J, which meant that was probably another 3 years away. And I kind of realised, well, it's probably now's the time to move outside. So I spent a bit of time looking around. So what's the easiest transition, or what's the best kind of transition with the skills I've got? I knew the health and beauty category pretty well, so it felt like a health and beauty category role if something came up. And then this coaching one came up I heard about through a colleague, and kind of went through that process. And it was a really great fit because I knew some of the new categories that they were going into, which are hair care, which linked back to the Alberto Culver experience. And then there were obviously some new health and beauty categories that they already had, like cosmetics and fragrance, which were very different. So, and it was a more mid-tier business as well, a very autonomous type of business. So that also really appealed to me at the time.
Yeah, right. And you're in your second kind of sales director role, Chris, with Hasbro now. So two very different sorts of businesses. Is the role essentially the same, or is it quite a different role?
Very yes and no. Yes and no would be the answer, to be honest. Yes, in the sense that there's a lot of core principles that are the same. Things like leading a team, setting a direction. Be working with them as part of a broader leadership team, making sure you've got the right customer engagement touch points from a senior level. Making sure that you focused in on all the core KPIs and deliveries of the KPI, whether that be obviously share profit, sales, etc. They're probably similar, but then there's a lot of differences too. Different type of business. It's not health and beauty.
Yeah,
there are a lot of differences that come with that, and that's part of the reason I wanted to go into that area to sort of test myself in the adjacent, core skills, but then adjacent category. What are the things that you can go and learn in a different environment? So. J&J is Hasbro is different because the channels that we're playing in are more kind of mass e-com, that kind of space versus maybe more traditional grocery and pharmacy areas. So that's a big part of the business. Then you've also got specialty toy manufacturing. I've never dealt with those guys before.
Yeah.
There's also another side of the business which we deal with. More fan collectible side of things, and things like with EV Games and JD Hi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting. Massively different supply routes to market. So you've got domestic, you've got FOB, you've got lead times which are significantly different from even multinational FMCG manufacturers who manufacture things outside. You're talking about planning cycles of 6 to 9 months in toys. So which are materially different from maybe 3 months, 4 months in maybe a lot of other businesses. So they're probably the differences.
Yes.
But a lot of the core kind of traits from a leadership perspective, what direction are we going in? How do you then, empower the team and lead the team to deliver the overall objectives of the business whilst you're getting your head around some of the differences, which is the learning curve.
Yeah. And it's toys, Chris, right? So is it
what's not to like
is
about
it,
toys?
Yeah, is it as much fun as it sounds it could be?
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It can also be. We say in Hasbro it's a complex business. Boy, is it a complex business. I was told it's a complex business before I started in 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And as I like to remind the guy who hired me, who now is over in the US, he said, "Boy, you never told me about COVID," which is like a whole level, whole different degree of complexity. But yeah, it's a huge portfolio of brands. So very, very similar to J&J, huge portfolio of brands. But so how do you prioritize those brands? How do you make sure that you're really focusing on those that are really going to make a meaningful difference, rather than just kind of like 2 or 3 products on a very small brand, which might not be very profitable, might not really turn the dial so much.
Yeah.
So how do you just galvanize the business around those priorities, really?
And I guess unlike more traditional FMCG, with the brands perhaps evolve steadily. I'm assuming there's a component within Hasbro and the industry of fashion and trend, and one year something's really big, the next year it might not be.
Yeah, it's the way it's kind of positioned is more from an internal Hasbro perspective. It's very much like fast fashion, is what they say. Okay. So you think about traditional FMCG, it's probably 10 to 15% innovation every year. And then when you look, you can really be single-minded and focused on the launch. It's more than double that in toys. And it can be, you can be in and out very quickly. So a retailer won't give you 3 or 6 months to see whether your product's going to work and you've got lots of time. They'll probably, they might give you 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks to actually say this works or it doesn't work. So actually, getting that product out there quickly is important. You also have a lot more failure in innovation by the very nature of innovation, right? Not everything works. So, there's a large amount of products that don't work, but then the ones that do work, how do you make them really work so you can get a big bang for your buck? So that innovation piece is really important. It also leads to, well, how do you then manage all your inventory when things don't work? How do you clear that through? What's the channel play for that? So different levels of complexity involved in that business for sure.
We talked about data earlier on and back in Boots days. I imagine that's something that you will guide you a lot more and which means you can make those decisions quite quickly based on performance, either from a commercial or consumer perspective.
No, we've got plenty of data in the business. I think it's more about just making sure we've got the right data in the right places. We've went into some of the shopper data here as well now, which is good. So we're getting some insights to support, some of those launches and where they fit and the size of the opportunity, etc. But we have plenty of data in the business to make those decisions for sure.
Right. Back to your role as a leader, Chris. So one of the things we discuss a lot when we're working with our clients is how does the business articulate its vision? How do they connect people to what they're trying to achieve at an enterprise level? You as a sales director, how do you do that? What have you got a tool, a methodology you use? How do you can ensure that people understand how they contribute?
I think it can be a tough one. I would say, and I think it's definitely not always the easiest thing. But the consistency and communication are probably the key themes that come through on this one, to be honest. And I think it also depends on the type of business that you're in as well. If you're in a global top-down business, or if you're in a local business, so two different routes. But effectively, once you've got, you need to first of all articulate what are you trying to achieve, and then I guess whether it's global or local, how does that then link in with the mothership? When you've got that, local execution plan or strategy, how you then communicate that to the team is really key, and being literally relentless in how you talk to it. So everybody's talking those top 3 or 4 priorities, and trying to keep it very simple so that everybody understands it in very small sound bites is critical. And then how you then measure that too is important. So we've done a lot of work in the business. I've been similar to other businesses. Goals are super important within that too. What gets measured gets done. That old chestnut does come out, and it's really true, because I think it's if you know what you're doing and have it articulated on one page, everybody's clear. All those goals for an individual are then lined up to the overall objective of your business. And then it becomes clear for an individual to say, well, I know my role and my contribution towards the broader organizational piece, whether that means you're on a growth brand or a growth customer or a customer that we just want to maintain, or a brand that we just want to maintain. They each have a role to play, and they're all really important.
Mm-hmm. Question from the chat, which I'll just jumping back to your UK and Australia, Chris, from Dominic Lee. There was what was the biggest change going from the UK market to the Australian market? Were there any strange nuances? I like the word strange nuances that you had to manage, and what recommendations would you provide someone wanting a more global career?
Good question. Good morning, Dom. Nuances. Yes, there are nuances. Off the top of my head, I probably couldn't think of anything specific, but I will give an example from the Alberto days. And Dom, I don't know whether he was there at the time. There was I think it comes down to mindset and approach and how you deal with those nuances. So, simple thing could be around promotional programs. One thing that really struck me when I got here was that, oh my goodness me, we've got Coles and Woolworths do weekly promotions. I mean, what is going on? This is crazy. How complex is this? The UK, we were doing 4-week promotions, like 12 promotional slots a year, 13 promotional slots a year. You've got 52. You can't have your Woolies and your Coles clashing, for example. Why not? Why can't you do that? I know you don't want the phone call, Chris. Okay. So I think I think from a mindset perspective, for me, one thing that I learned pretty quickly was to not necessarily judge. And the phrase that we came up with, my wife and I, was, it's not right or wrong, it's just different. So I think when you're going from one country to another, there's a certain degree of understanding that you need to do and be respectful of the environment that you're in. And then when you feel like you know, okay, you know a little bit about it, then what are the things that you can add from a build, because you do have different experiences from different markets. And there are things that you can add in that will add value in an organisation, or at least you hope there are.
Very well said. Nothing worse, and I've been on both sides of the fence here when other Brits over here or Aussies in the UK talk about how much better it is back, in their own country, and why is it not done the same? And as you say, hey, it's not better or worse; it's just different.
It's different.
Yeah,
it's different. And if you don't like it, as one of my team very aptly put to me, I've been here about 6 months when I was moaning about the price of the Mars bar, and it was like on one of the first half price deals, which made it probably more in line with the UK. But obviously there's a different cocoa content. I said it still was questionable taste, even though the price was okay. He just looked at me and went, mate, the airport's that way. There's no locks on the door. You can do whatever you like. I'm like, okay.
There's no locks in the door.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's about choice, right? So you've got to have that open mindset.
Great. Conscious of time, but a few other things I want to get through as well. But when I'm always interested in talking to leaders, Chris, and you've been in a senior leadership role for a while now, and when you're bringing in talent, so looking through the recruitment lens, I get that skills, experience vary by role, but are there common traits that you see when you're recruiting for, you think, actually, that's the sort of thing I'm always after, something innate with that person that I know is going to work well with me or my business, my team?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, Mike. Look, there's probably two or three things I'd say. Firstly, it's always great when you see a candidate who is really prepared for an interview. So, they show an interest in the role. When you're going through maybe some more generic questions, it's not many, it's maybe 4 or 5 or what have you. What are the examples that, worked? What things have they overcome? What are their key stories? But equally be as succinct as you can. And I know sometimes that's something I sometimes struggle with. Second one then is around, what's your interest in the role? What research have you done? The ones that kind of stand out are the ones that come in and go, oh, I've been out in the store and I saw this great execution on your brand. Tell me, do you do those often? How many of those does that work? Is that a really effective one? Or this was done by a competitor. The ones that don't stick, and this has happened many times, more times than I can remember, is when you ask them what their favourite brand is and mention the competitors. So I have actually, even at Hasbro, I've gone, oh yeah, well, I said, what's your favourite brand? I go, oh, Barbie. I'm like, that's Mattel's. That's not ideal. But then the other things as well is, I think it's this trying to underpin this. Well, whether it be professionally or personally, what are the stories that the individual's got, and how are they exuding a degree of curiosity and a willingness to learn and grow, etc., and not just looking for the next job. And what do they see? What do they see as their career path? What's only doing 3 or 5 years? I love someone turning up with a view to saying, looking, where does this job lead to? That's a really great question back. Rather than just, oh, it's this job. The more times you hear that in a candidate, the better, because it shows they've got their own, plan for themselves. And that's really, that kind of just shows a degree of ambition and actually sort of curiosity as well, saying, look, I'd like to do this, but I know I need to do this to address some of the issues or challenges or development areas that I've got now. How, and this role would deliver that by.
Agree with all of that. I think we cover actually pretty much all that, Chris, and more in our interview guides, which we produce for anybody who's either preparing for an internal move in their business or they're moving externally, whether through us or through any other means. Guys, those guides are gold. So please reach out to one of the XR consultants and you can get pretty much everything Chris has said and a bit more in there. But cool. Chris, if you were to kind of sum up and try and give 3 pieces of advice to someone in their early to mid-career, looking at you and your role and thinking, I think I would love to be a sales director or a senior leader of some sort, what advice would you give them?
I would say early in your career, learn what you like and learn what you're good at as well. Focus on building your skills and knowledge and experience, and use your network. to really, test yourself, to actually understand what else is out there, because often you don't know until you do speak to other people who are doing different roles. And the other piece would say, be really open-minded, be curious, want to explore, want to do different things, want to take yourself out of your comfort zone. If you're just in sales, the really great salespeople are the more rounded ones, and certainly ones that I've seen and have been either been in my teams or been in different businesses that have done really well and been promoted and doing, similar jobs to me now. They're the ones that have actually got broad cross-functional experience and they've got it early in their career. So whilst it can sometimes be a little bit of I'll go sideways and I'll do this for 18 months. And then you go, well, maybe I could get the next job and the next pay rise now. It's not always about the pay rise now, because actually what you're doing is you're laying some really broad, solid foundations for your career later on, which will absolutely pay back. So I know that's what's kind of happened to me. I wouldn't necessarily say it was a huge plan early in my career when I got that broad cross-functional experience, but it's certainly paying off, now having that sort of first 3-4 years with that breadth that I got, and people who've done, from sales to a category, sales to marketing. I've even had people in my previous teams who've moved into finance from sales and then come back again. That's fantastic. That just creates a whole different, mindset and perspective that person brings to the role. And those people will generally, not always, but generally, they'll set themselves up for long-term success.
Great advice. And you, Chris, what's next? Where do you go?
Oh, well, look, I'm really enjoying the role I've got now at Hasbro. So, carry on learning in the role I've got now. Longer term, it'd be great if there was a broader role within Hasbro, or alternatively, if there's not, then, a different growth orientated business further down the track. But yeah, I toys are a great business. So very much enjoying it at the moment. Yeah.
Fantastic. So general manager beckons down the line, that sounds at some point. And the last question, is where we started, which was this lack of talent flow between retail and supply. Now, we've managed to facilitate a few moves in the last year from retail to supplier side, which is great. And I think the more the better. But how do we open people's minds to this?
Yeah, well, I think probably a couple of things. From a business perspective, I think businesses need to be open to this a little bit more. Too often businesses recruit for, have you done a national account manager job before? Where have you done it? And it's a little bit too vanilla, quite frankly. How can that business kind of bring in a different perspective of what the retailer or supplier side is? And really kind of, I guess there's a learning opportunity for them as an organization in those smaller teams, really. So I think that businesses need to be open first and foremost. Secondly, I would say from an individual perspective as well, we need more people to have that curiosity and a willingness to want to try something different and say, I wonder what it is like on the other side, a little bit like I did in a way right back at the start, to go, I've seen all these guys, some of them are brilliant and some of them aren't, but what defines good? And everybody will have their own definition of what defines good. I think that's especially important, the broader career pathways that we can have when, you look at broader sort of FMCG now, and there's, a lot of, the younger people now wants to go into new tech areas, right? So how do we make sure there's real breadth of career pathways between the two? And lastly, I'd probably say from a personal perspective, with the experience I had, I would say if you're going to do that move and you want to do that move, make sure you pick a business on either side, which has got the breadth, the skills, the capability, the people in it, that are going to support you. So is there somebody in that business that could be a buddy? So I know I really learned more when I moved away from Britta after that 12, 15 months and went straight into Pfizer, because I realized I needed something which was going to have more like-minded people, who a couple of people in that business had done the change. They could help and coach and manage and provide advice. So I'll probably say it's a combination of those 2 or 3 things, mate.
Excellent. Well, I'll be aiming to put, some more retailers on my shortlist. The team will be this year, so watch out. And if there's any retailer listening, then get in touch. We'd love to try and help you go that way and perhaps other ways as well. So fantastic, great advice, Chris. Really enjoyed the conversation. Some excellent content in there. Hopefully the technology held up. It was making all sorts of noise as we went, but hope we can get the audio right for podcasts. And thanks for sticking with us on the live session, guys. Now, Our mission at AXR Recruitment Research is to help you make great career decisions and to understand your pathways. If you're not yet connected to the team here and you're looking for just some understanding of what career goals could look like, then please reach out to have a conversation. There's lots of ways we can also help you, as well as just defining those pathways. We've got our 2023 salary guides, which are out. They are going phenomenally well. Can't believe the number of downloads there. Recruitment guides I mentioned earlier on how to get yourself interview fit, a whole bunch of things there. Monthly mail shot on who's moved where, which is really good to just understand what moves are other people making beyond just the ordinary. So we try and package up the really interesting ones that we're involved with. We're back on again next week, so only a 1 week gap. Another live session with an industry superstar, not that you aren't, Chris, another superstar, Sue Temple, who's managing director of an organization taking the loyalty market by storm, founders of Loyalty, a business we're enjoying working with. If you can't make live sessions, don't worry. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, available on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts, where you can access over 50 leadership journeys and lots of cool bonus pods. So thanks again, Chris.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
And for me, Mike Dickson, have a great day. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more inspiring journeys and advice from Australia's sales and marketing leaders. You just can't get this career insight anywhere else. My name is Mike Dickson. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.